Welcome to Chinatown. This is the oldest and largest Chinatown in the entire Western world outside of Asia. We're lucky enough to have it right here in San Francisco. So today I'm going to take you on a walk through the amazing streets of this neighborhood. We'll show you the front side of Chinatown, the shops, the restaurants that you may have visited before or seen in movies or pictures. But I'll also take you on a behind-the-scenes tour, go to the backstreets and hidden alleyways in the neighborhood. That's really where the history and the culture of the neighborhood are. So hi friends, my name is Britt and I'll be your guide today. I've been a tour guide here in San Francisco for the last 7 years, and I'm excited to have this video channel to show off these neighborhoods of the greatest city in the world. You can visit it right there from your mobile device or at home. So if you like these videos, please feel free to hit that like and subscribe button down below. This will alert you to new videos when I post them in future weeks, and it also helps other people find these videos if they don't know about it already. And if you particularly love this video, I've left a link in the description below where you can buy me a cup of coffee. It's always a big help, of course. If you have any questions about this neighborhood or if you want to see other videos, please feel free to leave a comment below as well. And without further ado, let's explore Chinatown. So we're getting started with our tour here at the corner of Bush and Grant Streets. And this is the main ceremonial entryway into Chinatown. We call this the Dragon's Gate. You really get to see some amazing architecture here. This gate was a gift to this neighborhood by the Taiwanese government. There's a lot of connections between the two areas. So this is a great way to begin the tour. So we're going to start walking up Grant Avenue because this is really the main street of Chinatown here. Now, if you've visited San Francisco before, if you've been to Chinatown before, you've probably been to Grant Avenue here. So this is really where you get a lot of the tourist shops, the gift shops, things like this. This is what they're trying to show off and sell. So if you're looking for any kind of San Francisco souvenirs or knickknacks, this is really the place to go. You can get all kinds of good stuff around here. Now, Chinatown really began back in the 1840s. 1848, we discovered that there was gold here in California, and it set off a massive gold rush of people coming here from all around the world. San Francisco truly became an immigrant city. And in 1 year, from the discovery of gold, San Francisco went from 500 people to about 25,000 people. So it's just a huge population explosion. And the Chinese immigrant community was one of the biggest groups to come out here. I'll show you these shops as we walk by here. When the Chinese people first arrived, they set up this neighborhood in 1849. This is really when Chinatown began. It was the first one to exist here in America, and has just grown ever since then. I should mention, I'm filming this tour right around the time of Chinese New Year. So what that means is there might be some extra excitement around here. There also might be some noise, some firecrackers and things like that around here. There's a lot of that around Chinatown, especially around Chinese New Year. We're going to take a little walk. We're going to come back to Grant Avenue. We're going to start back with some of the old history of the neighborhood here. Now, when the Chinese people first started arriving in San Francisco, their life was very, very difficult. They were faced with a huge amount of racism and discrimination and even violence used against them. Laws that we were passing designed to hurt the Chinese community or push them out in one way or another. So one of the main stories of this neighborhood is the tenacity, the determination this group of people has had to build their neighborhood and to maintain it all throughout the years. And this has now become the most densely populated neighborhood in the entire United States outside of Manhattan in New York City. So in about 24 square blocks of Chinatown, we have roughly 35,000 people living here. So it's a lot of people crammed into a very small area. So a lot of the places in the neighborhood tend to get very busy and crowded. But this square here, called St. Mary's Square, it's named after that church there, St. Mary's Cathedral. This is one of the very few areas in the neighborhood they keep calm and quiet and peaceful. And one of the reasons they do that is because this is where they memorialize people. They remember folks who were important to this neighborhood and to the community. And this is a good example of that. This plaque on the wall is honoring all the Chinese Americans from around here who died while fighting in World Wars I and II for the United States. And this was at a time when there was a lot of hostility against the Chinese people, racism, discrimination. But this was a group of people who was willing to fight it, ended up losing their lives to support the United States. It's an important reminder of their sacrifice and the service they made to the country. There's another memorial just over here. You can see this statue. This is a statue of a man named Sun Yat-sen. We call Sun Yat-sen the father of modern China. He's one of the people who helped lead the revolution to bring down the old system of government in China and replace it with something more democratic. You may have heard of things like the Ming dynasty, the Qing dynasty. These dynasties that ruled China under an emperor for literally thousands of years. Well, Sun Yat-sen believed the people should have more of a say in their future and their government. And so he helped lead a revolution that brought down the emperor and replaced it with something more democratic. Back during the days of the gold rush, there was a lot of violence and debauchery around here in what we call the Barbary Coast period. So the Catholic Church thought this might be a good place for the first major outpost out west. They built St. Mary's Cathedral in 1853, the first Catholic cathedral on the west coast. This was at the time the tallest building in all of San Francisco, towering over the city at 89 feet high. And you can see it's not close to the tallest building anymore around here. But St. Mary's Cathedral, it's one of the oldest buildings in the city. We still have a very young city here in San Francisco. Now, in 1906, this was one of the major events that changed the city forever. We had suffered a massive earthquake in San Francisco. It was followed by a devastating fire. And the whole neighborhood of Chinatown burned to the ground with one exception. St. Mary's Cathedral was the one building that was left standing. The fire burned the inside of the church, but the structure survived. But everything else was destroyed. During this time, the city government was talking about pushing Chinatown away into a really undesirable area. Since all the buildings were gone anyway, what's the use in protecting this area? And this neighborhood, they did something that changed the entire world of these Chinatowns around the world. And as you can see right on this corner, this is one of the first buildings they rebuilt they built it for the first time after the earthquake and fire. And they made it in a really interesting way. Now, before the earthquake and fire, most of the buildings in the city looked like this, just kind of square, red brick buildings. That's mostly what Chinatown looked like. And that's what Chinatowns all around the world look like. But they created this really interesting Asian-style design with these pagoda-style roofs, the curved roofs, the colors, the green, red, and gold. They all have positive meanings in Chinese culture. And they wanted to make it look a bit more Asian. Now, I'll tell you, it's not really authentic Chinese architecture. I call it kind of Chinese-ish architecture. But people around here, they didn't really know the difference in San Francisco. And so people find it fascinating. So these visitors and tourists, they would come to this neighborhood, and they want to see these amazing Chinese-style buildings, at least what they thought of as Chinese. And there's another one just over here. It's the same kind of design. And so this became a very popular place to visit for visitors and tourists. And so they made more and more of these buildings. And as other Chinatowns around the world found out that people were enjoying this so much, they also built these great lanterns up here instead of regular street lights. And so this became a very, very popular place to visit. And so Chinatowns all around the world started copying this design, and this became a model of Chinatowns around the world. So even though it's not really authentic Chinese architecture, these two buildings really changed Chinatown forever here. And just as we were walking by here, we passed by the cable car tracks here. This is always a very, very fun a very fun ride to visit if you get a chance. The cable car was invented here in San Francisco in the 1870s. It's a great ride to take. We'll continue on up Grant Avenue here. And this is just a great street. You can see all these amazing red lanterns above your heads here. Now, if you follow these red lanterns at nighttime, they all light up. It makes for great photography and videos around here. Take a walk down this main street here. It always makes for an interesting time walking around here. One of the things you'll often see around this time, I'll show you over here just behind this car, is all these scraps of red paper here. Now, when the Chinese New Year happens, as I mentioned, they set off these firecrackers all around the city. And it sends off these showers of red pieces of paper. There'll be remnants of that around this time. So Chinatown, I mentioned, it began in the 1840s. It was completely destroyed in 1906. And ever since that time, they've been maintaining it and building it all throughout the years here. And this street, this is where they really survive in a way. They rely on all this tourist revenue coming in here. And so the recent pandemic has really struck this neighborhood hard, especially because tourism has been down so much. So we're just starting to see it rebound. Late 2021, early 2022 here. The neighborhood, you're starting to see it come back up, which we're very thankful for. You see all these flags and banners for Chinese New Year as well. The red lanterns. Like I said, it's a great time to come here. Maybe after about 6 o'clock. Most of the shops are closed down, and the streets are much more empty. don't worry, it's a very safe neighborhood to walk through. It's a great place to visit during the daytime or at night. I love all the flags around here, the symbols and the banners. You see that all around this neighborhood. We'll talk a bit more about what some of these buildings are in a bit. But I really love this intersection. I want to show this off to you over here. If you're interested in buying a wok, you can go to the Wok Shop right here. All the Chinese supplies for Chinese cooking Chinese meals.
Very tasty, sir.
So this is a really nice intersection right here for a number of reasons. First, because it really shows off how much the neighborhood cares about art, street art, and murals. This is a great one just across the street. This is a mural of the actor, martial artist Bruce Lee. And he became world famous, but he was actually born here in Chinatown, just a few blocks away from us here. So the neighborhood's really proud of him. You'll see a lot of murals with his depiction on here. There's another one. It's a little hard to see behind this car, but all around the neighborhood, basically, if there's an empty space on a building, somebody's going to put a painting up there. And the neighborhood actually has a fund. They pay local artists to create these murals. It's a really great thing to see just about every intersection. And now, let's see if we could see this. Try to find this in the end here. But if you look down at the far end of this street, you can see that building, the kind of pointed building with the clock on it, way at the back. And what that is the San Francisco Ferry building. And I always recommend people check out the Ferry building. It's a great place to visit. It has shops, cafes, restaurants, a beer brewery, a wine tasting place, cheese factory, bread bakery, amazing views of the bay and the bridge out there. If you get a chance to visit, be sure to check out the Ferry building. I'll be making a video of that not too long. We'll keep coming over this way here. Going down Grant Avenue. There's so many of these little shops going on here. And I was talking about the pandemic, how hard it hit this neighborhood. And people often ask, is it still okay to visit there? Is it unsafe? And it's interesting because I talked about how densely populated this area was. This has so many people in such a small area. We'll talk about how they live in just a little bit. But once the pandemic hit in the early days of the pandemic, immediately this neighborhood was masking up and they were distancing as much as possible. And this ended up being one of the very safest neighborhoods in the city with the fewest cases of the virus. So the neighborhood really looked out for each other, they protected each other, and so it made just an enormous difference. This is another great mural down here, and another one of Miss Bruce Lee. Just down this way. We went to St. Mary's Square earlier. We're going to go to the main Chinatown Square in just a moment, called Portsmouth Square. As much as St. Mary's Square was kind of calm and quiet, Portsmouth Square is usually the opposite. This is where the action happens here. Now, I talked about how many people live here. We have 24 square blocks of Chinatown, and about 35,000 people. It's more than 1,000 people every block. So how do you fit that many people in here when you can see the buildings are not very big in Chinatown? You generally have these 3-4-story buildings around most of the neighborhood. And what that means is the apartments that fit people are very, very small. So an average Chinatown apartment in San Francisco is between 50 and 100 square feet. So that's between 5 and 10 square meters. It's just a teeny, tiny little place. But the reason for that is because San Francisco is the most expensive city in the country to live. Average San Francisco apartment, just a one-bedroom apartment, is about $3,500 a month. It's hugely expensive. The Chinese immigrant community doesn't make nearly that much money, so they get one of these small apartments they could buy for just a few $100s a month, and they're able to live in this neighborhood. But what that means is, okay, well, let's say you want to hang out with friends or family or entertain guests. Well, you can't do that in your own apartment. There's just no space to fit people. So that's what this square is all about. This is the public area where everybody comes out to visit. And this is actually a particularly quiet day. There's not a lot of people around here, but people come down here and they'll do things like they'll play cards. They'll just sit down on the benches playing cards. They'll play music around here. We'll walk by some of the musical instruments being played around here. But this is really the gathering spot, the really important part of the neighborhood. this is really a collective. People get together, they get to know each other, they work together. So it's a really critical part of the neighborhood. In this area, it also has to protect itself. In the early days, it was protecting against racism, discrimination, violence, but now the biggest threat to this community is all around them. You see these huge buildings. Chinatown is directly next to the financial district. This is the most expensive, most valuable neighborhood, or most valuable land in the city. And so there's a lot of companies, a lot of businesses who want to buy this cheaper land in Chinatown, tear down the buildings, and build these new office towers here. You know, a company makes huge a fortune on that. But for this community, if they lost one building over here, another building over there, all of a sudden their neighborhood just end up disappearing and there's nowhere else to go. And you can't find another apartment in San Francisco for $500 a month, especially trying to keep the community intact. So this neighborhood has always worked hard to keep itself intact and prevent against all that development from coming in. And what's amazing is you can really see how well they've done with it. All these tall buildings just stop right at the border of Chinatown. It's just a really unique situation where this immigrant community has fought against some of the most powerful corporations in the world and kept their neighborhood intact. And that's what this piece of the neighborhood is all about. Everybody working together, getting to know each other, so you can have those political fights and things like this. This right here, I mentioned we just had Chinese New Year. It's the year of the tiger. So you see a lot of these tiger statues all around San Francisco here. They're building all these. So some of the people playing cards around this area, getting some food from some of the dim sum shops and bring it down to the park. So if you come to Chinatown, you got to check out Portsmouth Square here. Just spend some time looking around. I talked about dim sum. This is some of the most common food you'll find in Chinatown. Now, if you haven't had dim sum before, I was talking about some of the architecture earlier, how there's kind of Chinese-ish architecture. Not real Chinese, but sort of what we think of as Chinese. Well, the Chinese food in America that we get is very much the same. It's not real authentic Chinese food. It's kind of, an Americanized Chinese food. But if you come to this neighborhood, you get some really authentic, great dim sum cuisine where instead of just buying one big meal, you can buy individual buns and dumplings, things like this, just little individual pieces of food. And there's so many great restaurants. I'll show you some of my favorite ones. But just about all of it's delicious and very affordable. So you get back up to Grant Avenue here. And we'll see maybe the most historic street of the neighborhood next here. Just down this way here, there's a bar on the right side called Li Po. They're famous because if you go in there, it almost looks like you're going into a cave. It looks like they've carved it out of the side of a mountain in a way, the way they designed the architecture. Their famous drink is the Chinese Mai Tai, which is a tasty but very strong drink, so watch out. The next street we're visiting here, just to the left, is called Waverly Place. And if you've seen the movie or read the book, The Joy Luck Club, which was a movie based here in San Francisco's Chinatown, and the main character's name was Waverly. This is just a really cool street here. You'll always see a lot of these flags flying up above here. These flags are the flag of the United States as well as Taiwan. There's a lot of Taiwanese immigrants who came around here. You decorate this area all over the place. I'll show you some of the most important parts of this street. It looks great looking up through all these really lovely flags all the time here. The main historic part of the street, just over here. A little bit of a glare. I'll try to prevent some of that. You can see this just over this door. There's that yellow sign that says the Tin Hau Temple. So the Tin Hau Temple, get that center there. The Tin Hau Temple was the first Chinese temple built in the United States here. Now I can't take you into the Tin Hau Temple because they don't allow cameras up there. But if you walk in the door, everybody's welcome to come in anytime. But you walk up to the 4th floor up there. It's up that top floor. And first of all, you get a great view of the neighborhood of the city. but it's just a really beautiful Chinese temple in there. So you can see pictures of it online if you'd like to visit. It's a great place to come. But another big important part of this street, as you can see just above, is that sign that says the Su Hing Benevolent Association. And just to the left of that white and red sign, it says the Ruan Family Association. And then over here, above this bakery, it says the Yifeng Toy Family Association. So you see the word association all around the neighborhood. These associations are called tongs, T-O-N-G. And you could see this green building here, right behind the flags, called the Hop Sing Tong. And these tongs are these neighborhood organizations. Now, if you're a new immigrant to Chinatown, you might not know anybody here, you don't know the city, you don't have a job, you need to find a place to live. And that's really hard to do, especially if you don't know the language, you don't know the people. And so what families and villages have done throughout China is they would send some people out here to start up these organizations. And then when somebody else from that family or from that village or town comes out here, they immediately go to their local tong. And they say, I'm new here, I'm looking for some help. And these tong, they'll help set you up with your first job, your first place to live. It just helps you get started around here. You make some friends, you build a network around here. And it makes such a huge impact on your life. It allows you to begin your life here in San Francisco. So there's about 200 of these tongs all around the neighborhood here. Now, if you watch Hollywood movies, the word tong has come to mean gang, violence, things like that, almost like a Chinese mafia. Now, with these hundreds of tongs, there are some that have gone bad and gone wrong. And there's an example right here, this restaurant, this Golden Dragon Dining here. Back in the 1970s, there were a couple of bad tongs that really were like street gangs. And there was one tong who was sent out to find another tong member. They found him at that restaurant, and they ended up shooting up the place. And there was something called the Golden Dragon Massacre. Ended up killing a number of people, and it did not even hit the person they were going for. It was just ended up being visitors, tourists, and things like that. So it's when the police really started cracking down on these bad tongs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on here. We'll go back down to Grant Avenue. You see a really interesting building when we get just past the corner here. There's all kinds, obviously can't get it in the video, but there's all kinds of really great smells around here. There's so many restaurants, just hundreds of restaurants in the area. And you walk through here and it all just smells great. All this different food that they're cooking. Great dim sum. Just want to point out this building to my right here. It's called the East-West Bank, but this was originally the telephone operator of the neighborhood. The operators would live in the building and they would work down at the bottom. But I was talking about the architecture earlier, how most of it's really not authentic, except for this building really goes according to Chinese architectural principles, with the curved roofs and how it gets smaller as you get up. So this is a really cool building to see here. Keep going just down this way. I was talking about the murals around the neighborhood as well. Basically, if there's a blank space on a wall or a building, somebody's going to put a painting up there. You'll see that all around here. Just these paintings on every little building, but not always paintings either. But there's one right on the corner here. And this is a mosaic. This is one of the more recent pieces of art. Beautiful, thousands and thousands of these pieces of colored glass here. And this is depicting dragon boat racing here. So you can see this is called Dragon Boats Chasing the Moonlight. Just a recent piece of art. Great things to see. Keep going down this little alleyway here. Like I said, it's these alleyways where you find some of the real hidden treasures. So, now, there's a lot of things to learn, not just about the neighborhood, but about the culture. If somebody in this neighborhood gets sick, for example, oftentimes the first stop is not just a Western-style doctor or hospital, but it's to go to an herbal shop. There's a strong belief in these herbal remedies, natural remedies. And so you'll see these stores selling herbs all around Chinatown here. You'll talk to the herbalist there, you see what the symptoms are, and the herbalist will give you some kind of like almost a prescription. Take these herbs, and you bring them home and put it in a pot of water, and you boil the water down, until it gets this really potent mixture of this herbal water, and then you drink that down. Yeah, it looks like this herbalist is closed at the moment. If you come through here, I don't know if you can see any of that, but there's a bunch of boxes and bags of herbs in there. See if we can find another one along the way. But that herbal water is supposed to be your natural cure. It gets at what you're trying to fix. So there's a couple of really nice restaurants right here. One of my favorites is this Great Eastern restaurant. And it's, so how good is it? Well, when President Obama came to San Francisco's Chinatown, he came to the Great Eastern restaurant here. So good enough for him, it must be pretty nice. But also this ZNY cuisine. This is more Szechuan cuisine. So you get kind of spicier food, but it's very, very tasty. You know what mala seasoning is. It's very, very strong in a lot of the meals there. So we keep taking a little walk up the street. Grant Avenue is really the main street of the area, and we've been spending some time there, but we're kind of weaving back and forth along the way here. We'll get right back up to Grant over here. And just a little bit down, we won't go on Grant Avenue at the moment, but a little bit down this direction, there's another shop called the Golden Gate Bakery. The Golden Gate Bakery became famous for one particular thing called egg tarts. Egg tarts are one of the real popular kind of sweet Chinese dessert. And the Golden Gate Bakery just has really nice egg tarts. They're very affordable here as well, just a couple of dollars. And they became so popular that every single day when the Golden Gate Bakery is open, wait for some traffic here, the Golden Gate Bakery is open, they have long lines coming out the door. And it's become so popular, they've made a lot of money doing it. But instead of hiring more workers and making more money, the family who owns the place, they just say, no, we're just going to go on vacation every once in a while. So you go down to the Golden Gate Bakery, they don't post their hours outside the door or anything. You just show up and there's a sign on the door that said, sorry, we're on vacation for the next 2 weeks. And I swear there's one of those every single month, so good for them. That's how to live. But it's become so popular, but it's closed so often. There's actually a Facebook page, and the page is called, Is the Golden Gate Bakery Open Today? And it was not set up by the restaurant, but just fans of the restaurant who got frustrated that it was closed so often. And so you can go to the website and just see, is the Golden Gate Bakery open today? So this is another one of these dim sum shops. You'll see that very busy, crowded area. Just see pictures of all the different types of foods they have. It's a nice, easy way to order here. I was talking about some of the Chinese food earlier. Got a Chinese-ish. The biggest Chinese-ish thing that I know of, that we think of as Chinese but really isn't, is the fortune cookie. Now, I always grew up thinking the fortune cookie was just ancient Chinese dessert, but it's totally not. The fortune cookie was invented right here in San Francisco, and it was invented by a Japanese immigrant. That's how Chinese this thing really is. Right around here. It had become a Chinese American tradition around here, Chinese restaurants. So this is the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory. And if you come to Chinatown, you gotta come to the Golden Gate Fortune Cookie Factory. You can see how these fortune cookies are made. They cook them right here in front of you. And let me tell you, these are the best fortune cookies you'll ever have, fresh right off the oven. Little alleyways, make sure that the cars go through here. Now, these alleyways are a really important part of this neighborhood and of the culture here. And normally in big streets, in big cities, you have the big streets and then the alleyways behind the buildings. But normally, alleyways in cities, that's where you put where you park your car, where you put your trash cans, things like that. But in Chinatown, it's where people live and where they go to work. So the alleyway system has become very important to this neighborhood, and they're really proud of the whole alleyway system they created. So you'll see all around the neighborhood, I'll point this down here, there's little maps you can find showing you all these dozens of tiny little alleys all around here. And so you'll see, so we're right here on Ross Avenue right now, or Ross Alley. So the neighborhood is just really proud of it. So they show these maps all around the neighborhood to show you what they've created and what they've protected. So you see another map of the alleyways. You can see they've kind of turned it, they've painted it into a home in a way. You see that's curved roof. It's acting like, as if, because Chinatown is their home. So it's really really nice thing to see. That's why we try to spend more time on the alleyways than we do on the main streets. Yeah. You also get some of the little hidden secrets that I think are funny. So we're just going to walk up another one of these. A little bit of a glare here. And one thing you'll see just across the street is Aroma Tea Shop. If you like tea, Chinatown is the place to come. There's all kinds of tea shops around here. And you can go in and you can just do a tea tasting. You know, I want to sample a few of these teas just to see what they're like. And they'll have dozens or sometimes hundreds of different teas here. There's the Aroma Tea Shop. This is more of the, you know, the affordable teas. You can see some of them here. You can look through. And if you want some more high-end, more of the fancy tea, you can go to another one of the shops. This is one of these herbalists you can find here. All of the drawers of different herbs. If you want some really fancy tea, there's a place called the Red Blossom Tea Company. It's more high-end, but the tea there is delicious. This is another little alleyway here. One of the things you can sometimes find are some just little cultural aspects that are sometimes interesting, sometimes funny, sometimes a little bit of both. It's one of those here. So I was talking earlier about the tongs. Some of these tongs turned bad. And there was one of those, this red building. Remember that Golden Dragon Massacre I was telling you about? The guy they were aiming at was the leader of this tong. It was right here. The leader of this tong, he was a very violent guy. He's in prison now, hopefully. But there's a strong belief in Chinese culture about evil spirits. You want to prevent evil spirits. And you do that in a number of ways, feng shui, things like that. But one of the things there's a belief in is that if you want to protect against some of these, use mirrors. Now, this flower shop right across the street, they thought that this tong is such a bad tong, they're causing problems, chaos, death even, that they're probably bringing about evil spirits. And so this flower shop, they put a little mirror right above the number, right above the light. There's a little mirror. It's meant to block the evil spirits, bounce them back to the other way. Well, you know, I think that could be considered kind of like an insult to you. It's like, I'm sorry, you think we're so bad you need a mirror to block our evil spirits? That's what they said. Well, you know what? We're just going to do it back to you. So right above the door, below the light, they put their own mirror up there, right across. So now there just might be all these evil spirits bouncing back and forth in the mirror. So just don't reach up there. Just one thing. Now, there's also a belief in that numbers can mean certain things. For example, you don't see the number 4 used very often in Chinatown. And that's because the number 4, when you say it in Mandarin or Cantonese, it sounds like the word for death. And you want to avoid that death, of course. Well, okay, if you look at these addresses around the neighborhood, this is number 44 here. Well, that's even worse. That has 2 4s in it. Well, it's not like you can change your address, because that's set by the city. But what if you can? For example, let's say you're living in that number 44 here, and then your neighbor moves away. Well, you're probably not going to move your entire life over to get a slightly better street address. But what if instead, it's like, you know what? I'm just going to take your number. And so that's what they've done all along this street. Anytime somebody moves away, they take the street address. And so you can see, we start here with number 52, and then we go down to number 44, but then we go back up to number 54. And then this next building, well, this is number 48. And then this next one over here, this goes back up to number 50. So anytime somebody moves away, all these neighbors do a little reshuffling of all their addresses to try to avoid the bad numbers here. So it's a little bit of a funnier aspect of the neighborhood. It must drive the post office crazy trying to figure out, all right, who's got this address now? There's another alleyway just down this way, another little hidden piece of history of the city. And you can start to see, I was talking about all these tiny apartments here. You can start to see them in general around this neighborhood. There will be a shop or a restaurant down at the bottom floor, and everything above will be apartments. And that's what you'll see around here. Take a little walk down this street, a little tiny alley. See some of that. Now, in the early days of Chinatown, especially during the days of the gold rush, and there was a lot of violence and gambling and vice around here. A lot of that in Chinatown. This street, little alleyway, had a lot of these old gambling houses here. And so this was illegal, but mostly the police ignored them, let them go. But every once in a while, they would decide to crack down. And so the police would come in here, knock down the door of a gambling house, arrest the people, take away all the money. Well, they had to protect themselves. And the problem is, there's only one door in each of these buildings. There's a front door. There's no back door, no side entrances. So they had to get a little bit creative. We're just going to go down to the end here. You'll see something they did here. This used to be a gambling house here. So when the police would be coming in through the front door, what they've done is they've built a second door up on the top floor that the police might not even notice. So they have this lookout down here, making sure that, well, you wait till the police come in here, because you can't just, jump out the door, because all the police are right here. But once they get inside, everybody runs and opens that door. Well, it's a little hard to jump right down here on the pavement. So they got even more creative. We'll see if you can see this. But what they've done right across the street, they built another door up there. Now, it's been covered over by the wall, but you might be able to see the outline there. They open up each of these doors, and they put a wooden board between the two of them. And these guys just started running across the alleyway as an escape. And they close the door behind them. The police get through, and everybody's already left. So just one of the little escape hatches here. Some of the gambling houses had these. Some of the brothels had these. The opium dens at the time, I don't think so much, because not like you're smoking opium and running away from anybody after that. I talked about there's two sides of Chinatown. There's also really two main streets. So we talked about Grant Avenue, the first street. This next street we'll be going to is called Stockton Street. Now, as much as Grant is for the visitors and the tourists selling things and all that, Stockton Street, this is really where you get the local neighborhood. This is where people do their shopping. We talked about those tiny little apartments you have. For that, people don't have big kitchens around here. It's usually a shared kitchen. So you don't have a lot of space to store things. What people do is they'll come down to the street and do all their shopping. We'll look into one of these shops here. The locals are shopping. So you buy all the food you need just for one day. You cook it all and eat it all. And you do the same thing the next day. So there's this constant process shopping around here, which means you're always getting the freshest foods. You never let anything go rotten in your house. So that on the corner, that bluish kind of glass building, it's going to be the new subway station here. They're just building a new subway throughout this. So this is Stockton Street here. As much as Grant Avenue, like I said, is for the visitors, Stockton is for the locals. So we'll come down and take a look at some of these shops that you can find around here. Some delicious food. A lot of this produce, the fruits and vegetables, are grown right here in California. So you get some really fresh stuff at good prices here. You get some mushrooms, you get some seafood, dried shrimp, dried fish, put in stews around here. You always get some traffic jams around here as well. I was talking about those dim sum restaurants earlier. This street is also a treat because it has my favorite, these little dim sum shops. If you look just across the street here, it's a restaurant called the Good Mong Bakery. Now, Good Mong Bakery, this is one of these traditional dim sum shops that it's not anything fancy. You go in here, there's no table to sit down at. You just walk in and there's a menu behind the counter. There's always a line coming out the door. You just order your food from the counter and you take it away. There's a big menu behind the wall and you just point out, I want one of those, two of those. And they serve you this big batch of food and you go and eat it in the park or back home. The whole meal ends up being $5 or $6. So it's very unusual to get a really nice priced meal in Chinatown. Good Mong Bakery is like the best budget restaurant in the city, I think. There's all kinds of other restaurants around here. If you want some Peking duck or some roast chicken, you get a lot of that around here. Good Mong Bakery is just really fantastic. We'll keep walking along Stockton Street here. Some really nice bakeries as well. coming up on Jackson Street here. This is another one of my favorite streets in the neighborhood. You get the really nice view with the bay and the bridge out there. There's a restaurant called Delicious Dim Sum on the left, which is in fact quite delicious. Back towards the back, can't exactly see it from here, but a place called Hunan Homes, more of a traditional sit-down Chinese restaurant here. Just kind of cross over through the traffic. One of the things you'll see, especially around Chinese New Year, there's a lot of these stores who are selling oranges. Orange is a very common thing common offering, common gift to give. You'll see them around homes, churches. People wish people sort of a housewarming gift. They'll give them a batch of oranges or a batch of apples. A lot of fruits are used this way here. Plenty more fruits and vegetables here, all extremely fresh. There's a lot of political activism around here as well. This is about the Falun Gong. Another great mural on the wall. This is public housing here. This is housing provided by the city. And they put a great mural up here. We'll walk a few more blocks along here. And we're going to finish up with a fantastic view for the city. Kind of a secret that not many people know about. So you have to promise not to tell anybody here. It's Stockton Street in Chinatown today. This is really well known as the actual heart of Chinatown. So whenever any politician wants to get elected in San Francisco, they always take photos of themselves on Stockton Street. The guy who was running for the governorship of California. This is a state of 35 million people. The governor made sure in his campaign ads that he was filmed right here on Stockton Street. Because in this community, everybody knows what that means. You want to be a part of this community. You want this community to support you. There's a big Stockton Street sign in the back of his ad. It's also just fantastic foods around here. So Grant Avenue, like I said, that's the place that a lot of people go. They don't really know Chinatown. And so it all looks like just one big touristy area. And a lot of times people miss this street. It's such a shame. It's such a shame. It's such a big part of this community. Now this is Broadway. We're starting to get to the edge of the neighborhood, just about. So if you look down the street, you start to get into the Italian neighborhood of North Beach. And there's, on the left, there's an old place called Sam's Place. This is not exactly part of Chinatown, but this is well known for having some of the best hamburgers and cheeseburgers in the city. In fact, one of San Francisco's best friends, Anthony Bourdain, may he rest in peace, when he visited San Francisco on one of his many trips here when he was filming, he stopped in at Sam's Place and said, that's one of the 3 best hamburgers in the world. To be fair, he had been having a few drinks before that, so we don't really know, but heck, can't hurt to try. They definitely advertise Anthony Bourdain quotes on their signs here. We're getting just about to the edge of the neighborhood, but you can start to see we've been walking block after block after block of this, and it just keeps going. You can see just how big this Chinatown truly is here. In lots of cities, Chinatowns are slowly being taken over, or instead of seeing streets like this, you'll see a McDonald's with a Chinese writing on it, or there'll be a Burger King with Chinese writing or a little curved roof. So yeah, that's what they say is Chinatown. This is really what Chinatown should be here. Just coming up to the edge of the neighborhood here. I'll show you a little hidden secret of the area. I was talking earlier about how most of the streets in the city, most of the buildings in the city, are not very tall. And that's because, you can see that all around here, that's because we have laws about development. You're just not allowed to build over about 40 feet, so about 12 or 13 meters in most of the city. That's why San Francisco's buildings are very short. It's also why things are so expensive. Well, every once in a while, there's a place you can go. You just get a little bit above those 40 feet. Sometimes a building will have an allowance where they're able to build just a little bit higher for one reason or another. This building we're going to got one of those allowances. They were allowed to build one story higher than everybody else. So we go up a little bit of a hill, and then we go up to the top floor here, the 5th floor. You just got a really nice view of the city. So you see there's a neat little parking garage here where, again, this is part of this neighborhood is all about their history. So there's a lot of photos of people all over the garage. They're important to this community. We're just going to be going right above the local police station right here, as you can see. We'll probably speed this up because we're going to be walking up a few flights of stairs here. There's a lot of stairs, but this is what your reward is. You get into one of the best views of the city, right in the middle of downtown. So you get that neighborhood up there with the taller buildings. It's called Nob Hill. And you look at the smaller buildings here. That's all Chinatown, Financial District, the Bay Bridge back there. If you get here at nighttime, it's beautiful. The whole side of the Bay Bridge is covered with about 40,000 lights. They just twinkle every night, a little light show. That area is called North Beach. That's the old Italian neighborhood of the city. That tower up there is Coit Tower. If you can get up there, this is also just a fantastic view. It's one of the highest points in the city at one point. That's Telegraph Hill. You have to walk up quite a steep hill to get to Coit Tower, but it's definitely worth it. This church right here, the Church of Saints Peter and Paul, the main church in the neighborhood. And I'll do a North Beach tour, not too long. We'll talk more about that. You see Alcatraz out there, all the way out to Marin County and Mount Tamalpais. Just over here, this is Russian Hill. You're allowed to build taller buildings on the tops of the hills. It's just a great place to finish up. A fantastic view of the city. We're sitting here in early February, and it's about 75 degrees. So this is California winters here. So thank you for coming with me on this tour of historic Chinatown. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to hit that like and subscribe button below. That really helps us out. If you want to support the creation of more of these videos, I've left that link in the description to buy me a cup of coffee later on. It always makes a big difference. If you have any questions or comments, or you want to see more of these videos, leave a comment down below. I'm happy to answer it. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can follow me at my Instagram page right here. Thank you so much for joining us, and come on out to San Francisco.